Welcome to this episode of Chatting with Staxx. I'm your host, Bill Staxx, and today I got Todd Barth.
Hey, good morning.
What's up, Todd?
Back then to the communication, this is just the start of computers and stuff like that. So, you'd get information that was going on in other prisons basically through word of mouth. It wasn't like now you can just put out a memo that we've got this going on and the whole world gets to see it, So you're pretty isolated to a certain degree. And these guys, that being said, would check each other.
But so if someone has a heinous crime, say against
Okay.
children or something, and they go to the SNY Yard now with all these
Right.
dangerous people there, is he safe?
Yes and no. Because again, now the SNYs, they have their own gangs. And not everybody on an SNY Yard is some guy with a heinous sex crime. A lot of these guys were hardcore dudes that played the game, that were high up in the game. A lot of these guys were very influential and heavy at one time. You don't make it there just by being a nobody. So they made it to that upper echelon, I guess, of upper management of the gang. And they did that by doing hits, calling hits, having influence, doing all that kind of stuff. That nature doesn't really go away. So a lot of times these guys are out there and now they prey on them. And two, these guys, a lot of these guys have children of their own.
Yeah.
You take it differently. You look at these guys differently. And some of these sickos, they are so messed up that they'll start talking about their crimes to other people. And these guys I can't tell you how many times we'd go in where a guy is basically damn near beat to shit or cut up inside a cell. And you go, hey, what happened? He goes, man, that guy started looking at pictures of my kid in here because he's got his pictures up of his children. And all of a sudden this guy starts talking weird shit about your kids. You can't fault a man for that.
No.
I would do it. Start talking about my kids like that. I'm going to throw that. And that was the dynamic too for us guards. You got to realize we have families and we're human. We don't want to be around. We're not going to make excuses for you. We're not going to excuse your behavior. We're not going to think it's okay.
Sometimes, have you seen the guards out somebody for having bad charges?
Allegedly. You'd get a hypothetical. Okay. So again, before social media, before the electronic age and stuff like that, a lot of times that's the only way they could find out somebody. I mean, newspapers were great. Guys would get newspapers in from their hometowns and obviously read the criminal section and would know when some guy got charged with rape or sexual acts on a kid and he landed in prison. The people, wherever you were from, that's, you were clicked up from, let's say, Butte County, and some guy from Butte County came in like that. Butte County boys, for the whites, for instance, would have to handle that. That's your grounds. That's your guy that came in from you. You deal with that guy.
So that's how it goes. Whatever race commits whatever crime, that race has to take care of it.
Right. Correct. Now, my experience with level 4s with whites and Southerners, they definitely handle their business like that. Other races like blacks, they don't care. Unfortunately with the blacks, it's a weird social dynamic. You can be a black, you can be a rapist, a child molester, a snitch, a dropout, and still be the shot caller.
What?
Their social mores, their philosophy or mentality is, well, that's what they did on the street. That's their thing.
That's wild.
With the whites and Southerners, it doesn't fly. They'll either punk you out for a little bit, but at the end of the day, they're going to get you.
So, have you seen crazy assaults on inmates? And can you walk me through maybe a situation that you witnessed?
Yeah, man. Again, one of the wildest ones I've seen was we had a guy who basically almost did like a Silence of the Lambs type thing where he tied up his cellie and basically started skinning him in the cell, peeling his back and doing all that kind of stuff. One of the ones that and talking to these guys here, I guess this is even more the weirder part than just what the crimes they did. So I had one case where this guy killed his cellie, and we walk in, we could see that he had, killed him with a ligature, choked him out, and in prison, they get these big fat plastic pens, and the guy's laying on his back, and the pen is all the way, and only this much of the pen, but only this much of the pen is sticking out of this guy's eye. And so I'm interviewing this guy afterwards after he killed him, and you Mirandize him, you do your thing, and the guy goes, "I'll talk to you." I'm like, "All right, man." I go, "Hey, so how'd this go down?" And he said that he wanted to practice towing, and he would tie him up. I go, "How'd you tie him up?" Because there was no struggle in the cell. You could tell it wasn't like he had a chance to clean it up or fix it up. There was literally no struggle in there. So I'm like, "How did this go down like that? Did you just jump him? Did you, And he goes, "No." He goes, "I told him that I wanted to rob banks when I got out of prison, so I wanted to practice tying people up." So this guy was letting him tie him up for practice. Okay.
Wow.
I go, "All right, man. Hey, did today was the day you decided you were going to do it? Was there a different feel to it?" And you're talking to this guy like you and I would be talking about a recipe for making ribs or something, and that we're talking about taking somebody's life. And this guy, an hour before had just taken a life, and I'm having this conversation with him. And he goes, "Yeah," he goes, "I was a little amped up, so I could feel his vibe a little bit." So what he did was he tied him up, threw him down, and started choking him. And he already had a sock ready to shove in his mouth so he couldn't scream. Choked him out. And I go, "Okay, so obviously you did the pen afterwards. What was that about?" He goes, "I wanted to see how hard it was to shove a pen through somebody's eyes to kill them, because that's how I want to kill my next victim." Right.
Wow.
Right.
Then, do you know what he was in there for?
Murder. And the other guy was actually in there for rape. So he kind of used that excuse as that's why. But realistically, with this guy, he was just a killer, and he wanted to kill, and he wanted to practice. And this was a living, breathing dummy for him to practice doing what he wanted to do.
Now, when this happens, do the outside officers come and investigate it? Like, what's the process?
Yeah, we do. So, obviously you try to preserve a crime scene. And from a DA's perspective, they'll tell you the hardest crime to try to convict is in-cell violence, especially in-cell homicide, because there's only one person talking. And that person can sit there and say, "Hey, man, it was self-defense." It's hard to convict. You try to get it, and very few of these guys are going to admit it. Like this guy, he was proud of what he did. So that was a slam dunk. But he's already doing life. So what are you going to do with it? And now California's gotten rid of death row. So why even bother? So what's the loss? And that's the other part too, is so we're talking about SNYs and PC and general population. What I was saying, it used to be very difficult for these guys to go into that program. They'd have to give up a lot of stuff. And a lot of times we're like, "Dude, this ain't enough. You've given us, the only thing you've given us is stuff we've already known. You're going back to general pop." I can't do that. I can't do.
And if they do go back, they're getting hurt or killed.
Oh, 100%. Dude, that was, there's no doubt. There's no doubt. You've set yourself up for that failure, at that point. So they give it more. Well, later on in the department, these guys, they could just say, "I want to go PC." Okay. Because lawsuits and everything else. Well, what created that was you had a lot of guys, you were asking about if there's still predators or prey on those yards. Yeah, because there's a lot of guys that went there that their mentality didn't change. It wasn't like you had a few guys that, I'm going to be honest, like went into prison thinking one thing, living this dream, wanting to be with the gang, loyalty, respect, racial pride, self-pride, wanting to belong, wanting to fit in or whatever like that, 100%. And then a lot of these guys realize that's not maybe all that it was. Now they're getting used and abused. They're being set up to do things that they don't want to do. You've got a guy who might have gone into prison an initial 2 to 3 year term, and now he's doing life because they had him stomp somebody to death. So you'd have guys that would kind of go, "Look, man, I'm not going to do that." So when they dropped out, there was a degree of respect with those guys for how they carried themselves, but not everybody does that. So now the fact that these guys, the laws have changed and stuff like that. Now they're reintegrating these guys because CDC made a huge mess. So when I first started, Mule Creek was the SNY prison, and there might have been 3 or 4 SNY yards throughout 33 prisons in the state. Now, dude, every prison has SNY yards. They're SNY prison. High Desert, I would have never thought we would have had SNYs. You know, it's like A yard and B yard now are SNY at High Desert State Prison. You know, you've got Mill Creek, you've got several of them. So the GP, so SNY is the new GP. And what the struggle with that was, is these guys create what's called an 812. That's your enemy chrono. And you can't go to a prison that has your enemy or the yard or what it's not. All of a sudden they're like, dude, we don't have room to put these guys, you know, especially if like you were a shot caller and you sent most of these guys to the SNY yards and now you become an SNY and you've got 80, 75, 100, 150, who knows, people that have you on their 812 as your enemy. Where do we send you? Okay. So go ahead.
The dilemma, like, so what happens if they mess up on the SNY yard? Where do they go then?
Dude, that was the other thing. We would threaten them with, hey, you're going to go back to GP. We can't do that. Legally, you cannot do that, you know? And then they started trying to do programs like where if you did certain amount of things, then we could try to reevaluate you and say that you're obviously not SNY. You're still playing the gang game and you're doing that. Try to prove that. And I mean, lawsuit wise, come on, you know, everything boils down to money and politics. That guy gets whacked. His family knows he was SNY. We put him back on GP. What do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, but he gets killed on SNY anyway. I mean, either way, he's going
to
get killed. Right?
Then we're kind of covered. You know what I mean? But you put him by the GP, it's like you're throwing him back to the wolves.
Yeah.
So now what they're doing, because of, like you said, that dilemma, now they're reintegrating him. And now you've got no shoe terms anymore, because used to be these heavies wearing indeterminate shoes. That's gone away. Took death row off the table. These guys have no fear. So now now they have no place to put them. So now they're putting General Pop in with these guys that were SNY. They're calling them, God, I forget the terminology. I'm sorry about it. It's like
integrating.
But it's integrating. It's integrating these back in. Dude, these prisons are going to be rocking.
Yeah, what do you think the future for these prisons holds with them doing this?
It's all bad. And you know, the thing that's changed too, and I keep bringing up the technology that's changed. These guys have cell phones; they can communicate different. The drugs that are coming in on drones, and because drugs are a huge part of it. Most of the violence that comes from prison, there's the guys that look, man, this guy's a scumbag, this guy's a dirtbag, he's got to go. But let's face it, most of the violence stems from drugs and drug debts, somebody not delivering, not doing that. Dude, these yards are flooded with drugs now, you know, with what they've, you know, the way that it's so easy for them to get it in now. So that creates, on one hand, the problem that there's not as much warring over it, but, you know, the market's flooded. So what do they got to lose? We don't do lockdowns anymore. Why do it? You're not going to be on death row if you kill this guy. Why not kill him? You know, I mean, they've made it is it's going to be violent, you know. And again, with the technology, my thing that we're looking for is, when are these guys going to plan an escape? We've got these transports going out every day. Every day at High Desert, we're running maybe 5 or 6 ambulances out. I'm having heart issues. It's these guys say that they're having heart issues. We know they're full of crap 99% of the time, because they're back an hour later from being out at the hospital. Yeah. But these doctors are afraid. Again, lawsuits, they're afraid of that. So you say you're having a heart attack, your family's close by, you've got a cell phone, hey, they're taking me out. Sully sends a message, hey, he's going out right now. It's going to happen. Somebody's going to meet up at a hospital, or somebody's going to try to take this team out on the road. And the other part of it, you know, I'm not trying to give a ball game on CDC, but when they have these emergency transports, you know who they're sending out? The rookie cops. They're sending out the rookies, because nobody wants to go on these. So it's a last minute type of thing, emergency. So you're having a guy who has really no idea what he's freaking doing, no experience. He's taking this guy out. Bad things are unfortunately going to happen in the future.
Have you seen anybody try to escape with your time there? Any incidents?
I've heard stories. I've never been a part of it. I've never seen it, but yeah, it's you've heard stories where some guys have tried to, you know, they've tried to get away and stuff like that. And
any attempted escapes?
Yeah.
When you were there?
Yeah. No, not at the level 4. We've got the, the electric fence and all that kind of stuff. I didn't see any of that kind of stuff, but other prisons, they have, that window is about that wide. And they've had guys that have figured out how to get the window out, lube themselves up, get skinniff, and slide out and get out of their cell. But, you've got
then they're running around the yard, right? They got nowhere to go.
Yeah. Well, and going back to, like I said, even with the drugs, you got a guy right before I retired that on the yard did that to his window, because where he had the drone dropping the drugs was so he could get out of his cell at night through that window, jump out, get the drugs, and get back into his cell. He wasn't trying to escape. He just wanted to get his drugs. I mean, He was one step closer to escaping, but,
Did you said the drone brought the drugs. Did you have incidents where drones were coming in, bringing drugs?
Oh, all the time. All the time. They would do it at night. They would go to the point of, and then to try to hide it or to do it, High Desert, I don't know if most prisons, probably because of all the trash, we have seagulls. I mean, seagulls everywhere. They were just garbage birds like rats all over the place. So what these guys would do is actually take a seagull, dead, shove the drugs inside the seagull, drop this dead seagull in the yard. Nobody wants to touch it. Guy goes out there and pulls it up and pulling this drugs out of there.
Wow, that's smart.
Dude, these guys, you got to realize, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to figure out how to beat the system. And not all these guys are dumb, man. Some of these guys are very, very intelligent. There's guys that, there's one guy in particular that he's worked his way up. I've known him since he started in prison. We made our careers at the same time, growing up together. And, this guy became, he just got his brand, for being in the AB. If this guy was out on the streets, I guarantee he would have been a CEO of a company. But instead, he's in prison for life, so he became the CEO of the Aryan Brotherhood.
Have you seen a lot of craziness with the Aryan Brotherhood?
Oh yeah, those guys, man, they're hardcore, man. They were hardcore. They did, the thing about them, the level of respect that you would get from them was great. But man, when they wanted to go after somebody, they went after them, and it was if it was a death hit, it was a death hit. And man, they were rocking and rolling, and man, no shame to it. They were proud of it. Like a lot of other gangs would try to get away from it or hide it. These guys wanted everybody to see what they did and why they did it and send that message.
The brutality, right?
Taking it to an extreme. There was one guy who, not long ago in the cell, he got in, and this guy, he was a killer. He'd already killed. He was in the hole for killing. They put a no good guy into his cell. This guy damn near cut his head off. And on top of that, gouged his eyes out. And his theory behind that was, well, I didn't want him to be able to identify me if he lived and we went to court.
Wow.
I mean, dude, to be in, we're not talking, we've seen the, cartel videos where these guys are cutting dudes off with machetes. These aren't great. I mean, don't get me wrong. These guys can make great weapons, but this isn't like you try to cut some meat at home. Sometimes try to cut a rib
with a
knife, right? With a decent knife, and you're struggling. You're like, how the fuck did this guy damn near cut this guy's head off with some metal bracing that he got off of a knee brace?
That's crazy,
right? And to take somebody's eyes out. That takes time. That's calculated. That and the fact that his reasoning for it was, look, man, I want that guy to be able to identify me if he lives.